Well, assuming that we're on Facebook Live, people are liking the video, so that means we're live. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our second virtual Noir at the Bar, Revenge of Noir from a Hard Place. A Hard Place is a cross-genre magazine publication. We run stories about people on the outskirts, the poor, the desperate, the disenfranchised, people faced with difficult situations, and what they do next. I'm joined by my amazing team of editors, Jay Budkowski, Jonathan Elliott, Nikki Dawson, Katrina Robinson, and Albert Tucker. Tonight, we're joined by authors we've published in issues 1 and 2 of the magazine. We have with us tonight J.D. Graves, Dustin Engstrom, Rob Budkowski, who is going to be playing music for us, Steve O'Connor, Preston Lang, Richard Risenberg, and S.J. Roseanne. Our first reader tonight was in issue 2 with an awesome story called Crawdaddy, J.D. Graves. He is an author and a playwright whose work has been published at the 2016 New York International Fringe Festival, and 2007 Frontera Fest in Austin. His short fiction can be found or is forthcoming in Black Mask 4, Mystery Weekly 2019, Pulp Modern Tech Noir, Switchblade 11, Tough, Breaking Bizarro, Broadswords and Blasters, etc. He currently serves as the editor-in-chief of the neo-pulp genre rag Iconoclash Review and is working on his first novel. He lives in the woods, as we've discussed, with his wife and kids. JD, go ahead.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you to Noir and a Hard Place for having me on. This is super exciting. I'm going to be reading a story that was published in 2018 in Switchblade number 8 called Wally's House. And just give you a little background to the story. It's kind of based on a true story. When I was a boy, Rodney Dangerfield came to a town nearby I live, and they took over the town for a movie premiere. And I was, just remembering that one day, and this story came to me. So I hope that you guys can hear me and everything is working as well as can be. All right, here we go. Wally's Steakhouse. I tell you, this place is all pickup trucks. I ordered a house salad at the hotel. Got a head covered in cheese. Instead of a fork, they gave me 2 strips and told me to dig in. And I'm the idiot too, because I did so, thinking there's got to be something that resembles what I ordered at the bottom of this culinary travesty. But no, it broke and gave me heartburn at the same time. I went over to the wall for an antacid and got exposed to the vast array of neck tattoos and the frail pajama-clad women who love them. Seriously, is eligible bachelor in this town a felon, or is it only the cute ones? No wonder you people marry your cousins at 15. If you wait any longer, they'll be tried as an adult. This is the only place I know where you graduate from high school and your parents throw a baby shower. Now, I've been to your waffle shop, and yes, every waitress there had high mileage and balding tires, but at least they weren't barn animals. I mean, not until you get them home and they start peeling off their onion gook. I think her name was Caitlin or Callie or Katie, whatever. She taught me a thing or two about lovemaking. I swear, it's the first time I ever got hemorrhoids as an STD. I went to the doctor to describe my symptoms. He said I had cat scratch fever. I told him I ain't been with no cat, and to hell with him for thinking so. He said cat stood for Catherine, and everybody in town knew to stay clear of the village tricycle. I asked if he meant village bicycle. He said, no. The city council stopped letting her ride those since she kept falling off with her legs spread at school crossings. How dare she, I said, and the doctor looked me over queer. I said, she was fun. I had no idea she was perverted. I mean, not at first. You got to be soft in the head to do a thing like that. So anyways, you probably all know why I'm here by now. I mean, it's a small town. Word travels fast when there's nothing else to talk about besides, crazy Catherine and her soft spot for exposure. I've been in show business since before I can remember. I've seen all 50 states and various states of consciousness, and I'm here to tell you that Stackhouse, Texas is one of the most pleasant and quaint burgs I've ever been contractually stuck in for a week. When my agent Barney floated the idea of convincing a small town to retitle itself Steakhouse for the world premiere of my new film, To Sir with Prunes, I told him, Barney, there's no way on God's green earth you'll find a place dumb enough to waste taxpayer money to change the name of their town for a movie. I always thought salt of the earth people like yourselves had better fiduciary sense. Boy, was I wrong. I tell you, it reminds me of when I had divorced my first wife for the second time. I told myself everything will be different this go around, and it sure was. I wasn't flat broke anymore. She took me for half of everything. I mean, she took me for half of everything before too, but half of nothing was still nothing. I got do little stunts like this to help pay the bill and make up for the loss. My producer, Marty Goldberg, is telling me to wrap it up. But before I let you get back to swapping wives or whatever it is you do here at the Stackhouse Chamber of Commerce, I just want to thank a very humble and gracious member of your community. Mr. Mayor, you opened your home to me and my film crew. You've got a very friendly fan. Your wife went out of her way to make the boys feel at home, and thank God your daughter applied the penicillin cream afterwards. If she hadn't, that infection would have stuck around for weeks. Wally's microphone went silent as I pulled him from the podium. He kept squawking that he wasn't finished, but I couldn't hear him exactly over the shouting audience. We barely made it out of there with our lives. Some crowd, Wally said, unfazed that I would be on damage control for the next 3 days. What were you thinking? I said, and jammed on the car starter. You promised to be nice in there. Wally just shrugged. I got nervous. The whole way back to the hotel, I refused to speak to Wally. He kept going on, but I didn't budge. In the elevator, he asked for his medicine. I told him he had to follow me to my room. I unzipped the bag and loaded a fresh needle. You're a pal, Marty, a real pal. Do you mind if I take care of this here? I hate needles, but his checks pay my rent, so I said yeah and stepped out for the elevator. Immediately, my phone rang. It was the Stackhouse mayor. My ear hurt from the screaming static. On my way down, he wanted to know many things, first being when we were leaving town. I told him, our contract with the Stackhouse Bijou wasn't up until Sunday afternoon. I said, no, we will not be leaving earlier than that. I said, well, you don't become a world famous comedian without telling a few jokes. I said, Wally more scream. Should know that personal issue about her that would be violating HIPAA laws. I said, no, Wally will not be available for a conference at City Hall today. I said, no.
JD, sometimes if you
all in
turn
late,
off
no
the
beer
video.
taps. The lobby clerk doubled as the bartender. The sloth slowly traversed the 20 feet between the two. What can I do for you? The man asked. I said, can I get one bourbon, one scotch, and one beer? He blinked at me, turned slower than Christmas to the shelf, and gestured, what you see is what you get. I nodded and pointed at the unmarked bottle. What's that? The man shrugged. One way to find out. What if it's drain cleaner? I asked. The man shrugged again. One way to find out. What do people usually order here? The man shrugged once more, and I gave up and went back to the elevator. Back on my floor, I saw that Wally had left my door open. No sign of him, thank God. I really needed a rest for what had happened that morning. The white ceiling blurred into peaceful darkness. And then my eyes opened again. I finally managed to escape myself completely when I heard the banging on the door. Police, a voice called. Open up. I scrambled out of sleep, confused. I opened the door. The cop wore a white Stetson, a beige shirt, and close-cropped mustache. His green eyes squinted to points as he drawled, "Are you Marty Goldberg?" "Yeah," I said. "What's the trouble, officer?" "I've got a warrant for the arrest of Wallace Stevenson." "Who?" I asked, still not awake. "AKA Wally Steakhouse. You're his agent, ain't you?" "No," I shook my head. "I'm his producer, handler, underpaid assistant, not his agent." The officer looked over my. "Is he in with you now?" "No, off. Wait, what are the charges?" The officer darkened. "He's wanted for sexual turpitude." "Oh," I couldn't help but laugh. Okay, I get it. Very funny, Wally." I stuck my head out in the door and looked down the hallway to see where that old bastard was hiding. The cop jabbed 2 fingers into my sternum. "This is no laughing matter, son." I got mad. "Easy, boss hog. You can cool it with the local cop routine. I know Wally put you up to this. How much is he paying you? $100? It's very convincing, but don't quit your day job at the grocery store." "Do we have a problem here, Mr. Yankee Goldberg?" "Yeah," I said. "I got a bit player trying to use his community college method acting chops to ruin my day, and it ain't working." A smile broke out under his mustache. "I'd watch how I spoke to the law if I was you, especially since you ain't in New York City no more, boy. Now, I asked you a question, and I need you to remember whatever your whore mama taught you as manners and answer it. Son, I don't got much patience for showbiz types. Would kindly direct me to Mr. Stevenson's room. I won't detain you any further." Thank you guys for the opportunity. It was really fun.
But that's okay. That's great. Man, JD, you've got a voice for these types of things, for readings, for radio. Really, really great. And a lot of STD jokes in that story. Excellent stuff. Perfect rock and a hard place content. We love it. Okay, so thank you guys. Our next story is from an issue 1 alum who's coming to us from the Northwest, and that's Dustin Engstrom. Dustin was an actor and playwright for many years before he started writing fiction. Many of his plays premiered in Seattle, including Private Accounts and The Cut, which received the Broadway World Critics' Choice Award for Best New Play 2012. His speculative fiction appeared in the Colored Lens magazine. His crime story, Not That Kind of Guy, which is awesome, appeared in issue 1 of Rock and a Hard Place. He's reading tonight from a new crime piece. Dustin, go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, by the way. This is a new work in progress, so this is just a bit of this is the beginning of the story and just a bit of a teaser of what's to come. It's yet untitled. Outside a strip mall off State Route 410, soaring parking lot lights formed isolated expanses of white within a misty fog. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Sam's rusted 90s silver Nissan as he drove onto the lot at 2 a.m. She watched for other cars as he parked in an empty spot at the far back corner near a nail salon. Sam yanked the keys from the ignition, turned to her, and smiled a yellowing smile. "You ready?" he said, his breath a disagreeable mixture of spearmint and alcohol. "I can't believe you've been drinking," she said, lugging up her purse. She took out her lipstick, pulled down the visor mirror, and began to apply the lady danger to her already flame-colored lips. Her friend Jill had swiped it from the Nordstroms in South Center. God, she looked a mess. It was now or never. She flipped back the visor mirror, removed this black ski mask from her purse, and stretched it over her face. "I'm ready. Let's go." 2 minutes later, they reached a back door on one side of the strip mall. A fluorescent bulb above the door flickered with a rhythmic tick. Elena found that the sound was asserting itself into her brain. Just get it over with. Sam bent forward and took the key from under the mat. So far, so good, he said, standing up and turning to face Elena. His eyes, through his own mask, shone a lively blue, strewn with strands of white. They looked like two marble globes, daring anyone to defy him. This is fucking turning me on, babe. Uh-huh, she said. Come on, we don't want to hang here. There's a security guard for the strip mall who makes his rounds at night. What? You didn't tell me that, said Sam, inserting the key into the lock. Can we just go? Said Elena, and keep your voice down. We have to get in, get the money, and still have time to erase the video feed. He nodded his head and pushed the door open. They stepped into the darkness, one after the other. Elena moved aside as Sam shut the door. It creaked closed with a loud click. He shrugged at her in apology, then pointed at the alarm panel with a tilt of his head. She tiptoed to the panel and entered the code. It beeped twice, turning from red to green. She exhaled slowly. It worked. The alarm system was for the liquor store only, and now that it was unarmed, they could walk right in. As of now, they were still standing in a hallway between stores. In a massive house outside of town the night before, Elena had sprawled out in Chase's childhood bed, eyes wide open, dreading these very moments. She gestured to the door on the right. Sam eased it open, and they crept into the shadows. Cooler lights gleamed like forgotten ghosts. The camera in the corner near the ceiling looked down with its single red eye. Gazing around the small store, she started to feel a steady unease creep up her spine. But she worked it all out, every step, twice, 3 times, really. And this plan was the right one. Why the jitters now? Probably because the next part would be the hardest. Sam had to believe everything was going his way. Fucking Sam. This would most likely be the last night she'd ever see him, and he was completely oblivious. She watched him peer around the store and then stop. What was he doing? He was just standing there like an idiot. What? She whispered to him. She gasped as she turned in the direction in which Sam stared. He was staring at Chase, sitting behind the counter, arms folded. He looked like a shadow, so at first she dismissed it. The trick of the mind, of the night, something. But no, the more her eyes adjusted, the clearer she saw it was Chase, her best friend. The best friend whose parents owned the liquor store she and Sam were in the process of robbing, one of the many properties they owned all over the county. She stepped backward. What the fuck? Whispered Sam. She couldn't look at Sam. She knew if she did, she'd lose her ability to deal with Chase. She pulled off her mask. Elena! Shouted Sam. Hi, Elena, said Chase calmly. Hi, Sam. Chase, what are you doing here? Asked Elena. Oh, that's good. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Sneered Chase. I mean, I thought, stumbled Elena. How did she say what she wanted to say without giving it away to Sam? Don't move, said Sam. Elena noticed Chase's eyes raise. He moved his arms down to his side. Sam, he warned. Elena faced Sam. He held a gun pointed at Chase. It looked like an old revolver, but it appeared real enough. Her heart kicked into full gear. What the fuck are you doing? Where did you get a gun? I didn't know he had a gun, said Chase. I didn't know he had a gun, said Elena. All right, nobody knew I had a gun. Wait a second. Why would he wonder why I have a gun? Elena, what the fuck? Did he know we were coming? No, Sam. No, she said, trying to sound cool, glancing from Chase to Sam. Yeah, Elena. Did you? Mocked Chase. She didn't respond, closed her eyes and waited for Sam to make the next move. Fucking A, man. Come out from behind the counter, Chase, said Sam, and put your hands up. Chase put his hands up. I don't want any trouble from you, Sam. Neither do I. Come out from around the counter, I said Sam, brandishing the gun in illustration. Elena watched as Chase eased himself from behind the counter, hands up, eyes on hers instead of Sam. She couldn't read them, but it looked as if he was trying to tell her something. They flicked back to the hall. The alarm system. And how in the hell was he in here with it on just now anyway? That's far enough, said Sam. Elena, find something to tie him with. Elena winced. I'm not doing that, Sam. Fucking hey, babe, we got a situation here, huh? Said Sam. We need to nip it in the bud. And then what? Said Elena, crossing her arms. What? Said Sam, forcing a look at her, then back to Chase. We tie him up, take the money, and then he eventually gets free, tells the cops, and we go to jail. Or isn't that how you foresaw this whole thing happening? Elena, we can't just... What? Tell me, Sam, what exactly? Well, I'm all fucking ears if you have a better idea, Sam shouted, waving the gun in the air. A loud boom followed, and then smoke. Sam's eyes thick with panic, his hand shaking as he brought it down. She couldn't look. She couldn't look. Did he really just fire that fucking gun? The gun he didn't bother to tell her about? I didn't mean to. I mean, it just went off, stuttered Sam, tumbling backward, tripping on himself. Oh, fuck. Elena, what did I do? She couldn't look. She couldn't look. Chase. She heard a gurgling sound like someone choking, a struggle for breath, and then a soft and sputtered, Elena. Oh, God. She had to look. And when she did, she almost passed out. She reached back and held a shelf behind her for support. Chase was on the floor, holding his shoulder. Maybe it wasn't fatal. Maybe. She couldn't be sure. There was a lot of blood, though, a lot of fucking blood. If he died, their plan wouldn't work. None of this would work. None of this was supposed to happen. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Dustin. I'm worried that Elena is going to ruin that whole thing. Man, she ratted him out. Terrible way to pull off a robbery, but a great story. And the comments are saying the same thing. And also, while I mention the comments, you have to comment more, because the more you comment, the more likely you will be picked in a raffle that we have for prizes. And those prizes are gift certificates for the Words bookstore, or as it's now called, the Asbury Park Book Co-op in Asbury Park, New Jersey. You can shop there online. You don't have to worry about being socially distant and coming to the Jersey Shore, even though we know you want to. So comment, and you'll be more likely to win in the raffle, because that's how we're going to kind of randomly choose folks to win these gift certificates. So do that. Comment throughout all the readings. The next author we have is now an editor. He's an issue 1 alum. This is Albert Tucker. He's the creator of Prostitute Diana Andrews, who has appeared in almost 100 hard-boiled stories in venues including the Best American Mystery Stories 2010. Her first longer case, the novella The Same Mistake Twice, was published in 2013. In 2017, Albert Tucker launched a series set on the Big Island of Hawaii, in which The Honorary Jersey Girl and Pele's Domain are the most recent entries. He recently retired from the Newark Public Library. Al, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Roger. I'm going to read a Diana Andrews story, but it's an oldie from the days of D.Z. Allen's Muzzle Flash, which takes us back to probably 2007. This one is called The Most Beautiful Sight on Earth. Get you another one of those? Diana froze. Maybe playing dead would make this man move on. But no, he kept standing at her elbow and pointing at her nearly empty beer glass. She put her look of death on and turned her head toward him. The look had made many a client get back in line, but it didn't faze him. Hooker habit made her evaluate the man. 40s, receding hairline, a little thickness around the waist. Client material. Too bad for him, she was off duty. This hotel had her favorite bar, and she saved it for when she wanted a drink on her own time. Thanks, she said, but I'm due someplace. Okay, you're waiting and I'm waiting. It's better with company. She tilted her glass and looked at the last inch of beer. One's my limit, I'm afraid. So let me get you one and you can just admire it. I think a glass of beer is the most beautiful sight on earth. White and gold, nice and clean. Not like some things. He had a point. Her hesitation gave him an opening to flag the bartender down. "Two more of those," said her new friend. He climbed onto the stool to her left. The bartender brought the beers. "I've done a fair amount of waiting in this place," said the new man. "For my wife. We met here. We came back sometimes to recapture the magic." From the sound of him, it wasn't working this time. "You're married," she said. If she had been on the clock, she wouldn't have commented. Married men paid her bills. "Not for much longer," he said. She said nothing. That was TMI. "Matter of fact, I'm waiting for her now. She just doesn't know it. She's upstairs in 215 with a friend of mine." He paused. "I'm going to kill them." Diana slid off her bar stool and landed with her feet pointing toward the lobby. So why weren't they moving? "Let's go," she said instead. That was often how she made a decision. She listened to what came out of her mouth and took it from there. "Go?" he asked. "Where?" 215 isn't the only room in this place." "What's in it for you?" $300 plus the room." "You're a pro? I can't catch a break today." "I'd say meeting me is the best break you've had in a long time." "I've never paid for it in my life." "Well, you're not paying for the sex part. You're paying for my advice." "I didn't ask for advice." Sounded like it to me. "Okay, what? You ever gone to prison?" "No." "Don't. That's my advice." He looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said. 300. Plus the room, plus the room. Thanks.
Amazing as always, Al. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, such great characters. Such great narration, reading, really awesome. So I'm now going to introduce our musician, and then after our musical interlude, I will hand over MC duties to Nikki. So for music, you hear it starting. We have Rob Bukowski. Rob is a jazz musician. He began playing the guitar at a young age, inspired by a family of music makers. He took up bass guitar and trumpet shortly afterwards and started performing in local punk bands at the age of 13 years old. In 2014, he graduated from Montclair State University with a BA in music performance and a concentration in jazz studies. Rob has since toured Italy, Canada, and the West Coast with the surf noir instrumental trio Black Flamingos, which are awesome, by the way. You should check out on Spotify. He also performs regularly with Plato Zorba, the Royal Pacifics, and Jet Weston and his Atomic Ranch Hands, to name a few. Rob, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. That was excellent. So next up, we have the excellent Stephen O'Connor, who's a writer from Lowell, Massachusetts, where much of his work is set. He is the author of the short story collection Smokestack Lightning and the novels The Spy in the City of Books and The Witch at Rivermouth. His work has appeared in the Massachusetts Review, Athlon, the Amsterdam Review, and elsewhere. Take it away, Stephen.
I think Stephen has stepped away for a moment. It's actually his wedding anniversary. So can we go to?
I'm here. Yeah, my
here?
picture froze.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, okay. The story's called Jailbird. Two men sat at a bar in Lowell, Massachusetts. It was December 22nd. It should have been snowing gently outside the plate glass windows that overlooked Middle and Central streets, but it was pissing rain. One of the men, Emmett Burke, was gazing out the window, watching the rain fall through the yellow halo of a street lamp and thinking it was another example of how the real never measured up to the ideal, which of course was the white Christmas that Bing Crosby had made famous. Irving Berlin's nostalgic ode to some wonderful days we used to know, a perfect holiday that never really existed. The Christmas in the ads where everyone is wearing warm socks and drinking hot chocolate by the fire. You know how Bing Crosby died? Emmett asked his friend. You know what his last words were? Tony Dos Santos turned away from the TV news where a professor was explaining that mistletoe was an invitation to sexual harassment. I made a lot of crappy movies. He should have said that. He said, that was a great round of golf, and he died right there in the golf course. He was a hell of a golfer, better golfer than an actor. I hate golf, but that's a good death, clean. Damn right, that was a great round, boom. I dream about dying sometimes. I'm always in a crash, an airplane or a car crash, and I survive the wreck, but I know I'm dying. I have the same dream over and over. What do you call it? A recurring dream. Right. Yeah, I have a recurring dream that I'm back in the slammer. The guard comes by and I ask him, when is my release date? Isn't it soon? And the guard says, no, Tony, they added a few years. And I'm there screaming, why? What did I do? I wake myself up yelling at the guard. That's a shitty dream. Awful. Sometimes I jump up with my heart pounding like crazy. Emmett watched Tony gulp his Michelob Ultra. There were fewer calories, he had told him, but Christ, that battle was lost. With the extra weight he put on after his release and his bad knees, Tony lumbered a bit now, especially after his 8-hour shift in the kitchen of the Falstaff Club. He was a shadow, a fat shadow of the tough bastard he had been before he spent 2 decades in the can for armed robbery. Emmett liked him. He had originally been friends with his younger brother. He had met Tony through him, though of course he had heard the stories. Tony Dos Santos was a local legend, or had been. The legend was old now. The young guys didn't even know him. People forget when you're away for 20 years. He noticed that Tony's beer was empty. He finished his own draft and ordered another round. There was a Christmas tree set up at the far end of the bar. When the aging ex-con turned toward him, Emmett saw that the lenses of his glasses were spangled with the reflected blues, greens, and reds of its bulbs. But he also saw or felt that the eyes beneath that shower of joyful color were anxious. Jerry, the bartender, brought their beers and asked if they thought the Patriots had a shot at the Super Bowl this year. They both shook their heads and agreed they didn't have the horses. Father Time is catching up with Brady, Tony said, and he's undefeated. And this fella here knows about time, Jerry said. Tony nodded gravely. Seconds, hours, and years, he said. Emmett reached for his draft and slid the Michelob toward Tony. To cheer him up, he said, dreams aside, you're out. You'll never be back in the big house. You're a law-abiding citizen now. Tony swigged his beer and looked at the Christmas tree. Finally, he said, let's take our beers over to the booth in the corner. I need your advice. Sure, Emmett said. And with his cell phone and damp coat in one hand and his beer in the other, he led the way. When they were installed on the table, the older man leaned forward and said, I want to tell you something. I have to warn you that by telling you, I may be putting you in great danger. So if you'd rather not hear it, I understand. Will I be able to protect myself? Yeah, you just need to keep your mouth shut. I can do that. This information is dangerous to know because it's deadly to repeat. That's why I'm warning you. I get it, Tony. All you need to say is don't tell anyone. I take that very seriously. Tony nodded and seemed to relax. Good, good. I know that. That's why I'm talking to you. He loosened his scarf. Warm in here, he said, took a slug of his beer. Someone at the bar yelled, "Who gives a shit about the news? Put the Bruins on." A cacophony of voices arose. "There's a guy," Tony began. "His name is one you would have heard, a street soldier from a particular gang of criminals. I won't repeat names here because that knowledge can only hurt you. He would kill you if his bosses told him to, or for a fee, or just because he doesn't like you. He'd kill you and think no more of it than you would of slapping a mosquito on your arm. I know him from the old days when I was doing drugs and robbing banks, and he knows me. Now there's another guy. He comes into the club most days, most weekdays for lunch. And this killer, he wants him dead." "Why?" Emmett asked. "Hold off on that for now, okay? So this person, this street soldier, approaches me as I'm leaving the club the other night. I was not happy to see him. Like I said, he's a very bad person. He doesn't live in Lowell anymore, so I was nervous. He slaps me on the back like he wants to talk about old times. 'Let's have a beer at the Worthen,' he says. You don't say no, Emmett. So we cross the street and walk over to the Worthen, get a beer, sit down, and finally he says, 'I hear you're a cook at the Falstaff. That's where,' and he mentions this other guy's name, 'comes in for lunch quite a bit.' 'Yeah,' I say, 'he's a regular.' The door next to the two men opened and they turned to see a couple coming in, lowering an umbrella. Emmett had been half expecting to see some scowling street soldier of an unnamed gang. A cheer rose from the bar and he glanced over at the TV. Krejci had scored and was gliding over the ice, his stick raised in triumph. He turned back to Tony, who was thumbing the label off his beer bottle. "So he asks you about this other guy?" "Right. And he asks me what the guy orders. I say, soup and a sandwich usually. That's what he likes. 'Listen, Tony,' he says, 'I need a favor. I'm going to give you something and I want you to put it in his soup. He won't taste it and people will think he had a heart attack. Happens all the time. He's in a high stress occupation anyway. And if they ever found it in him, anyone could have put it in his soup when he went to the men's room. There's a crowd at lunch, right? You'll have cleared off his table and put the rest of the soup down the drain, cleaned the bowl. The poison will come in a small paper container. You burn it at the gas stove flame. There's no evidence. None. Someone could have poisoned him before he ever got to the club.'" "Jesus H. Christ," Emmett said. "Well, what did you say?" I said, "Listen, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'd like to help you out, but I can't do that." I told him about my recurring dream that I'd rather die than go back, that I follow the rules now because I can't do any more time. I'm too fucking old. I tell him all that because he can understand it. You see, I don't say I'm not a killer. I never was. I was a bank robber, Emmett, yes, but I never shot a teller. I never would have, really. Like that old song says, I walked in a lot of places I never should have been. That's true. But a killer, I never was. Now, how did he take it? He listened, and he stared at me, right into me. I'm telling you, when you look into the eyes of a guy like that, you can feel the cold. Then he says, $5 grand now and 10 grand after. Would that change your mind? The price is negotiable. I told him it wasn't a question of money. I just couldn't do it. Finally, he says, I understand. People will be disappointed, but I'll explain the situation. You don't have to worry, Tony. I always liked you. When you went down, you kept your mouth shut and did your time. I respect that. We'll do right by you. Only one thing I'm sure you already know. If it ever gets back to me that you told anyone what we discussed here tonight, I will kill you. I told him I wouldn't blame him, and he got up and left. After he had heard the story, Emmett said, what's the problem? My advice is to shut up. Mafiosos kill each other all the time. You're not going to change that. You're off the hook. This guy they want to kill is not a mafioso. He's law enforcement. Not my brother. Is that what you're telling me? Not your brother. Your brother would know him. This guy is a prosecutor in the city. Shit. I told you I wanted your advice, Emmett. That's not true. I guess I want your approval. Like I said, I did a lot of reading in jail, a lot of thinking. Who am I? Who do I want to be? It's almost Christmas, and I thought, how am I going to feel when this guy's family celebrates Christmas without him because some piece of shit doesn't like the way he does his job? And I just let it happen. You already told the cops. He nodded. I ain't going to die like Bing Crosby, Emmett, but I'm at peace with that. I taped a deposition this morning. Emmett's brother told him a month later that the cops had arrested Greaser DeCola, Mule Murray, and Garrett Buckley and charged them with conspiracy to commit murder and a string of other crimes. Who were they planning to murder? Tom Benchley works for the DA. There was an informant. Then they got a wiretap that confirmed the contract these guys were planning to put out. The cops offered the informant witness protection, but he says he's going to stay in the city. Well, maybe when they're locked up, his brother let out a skeptical chuckle. Yeah, good luck with that. Emmett called Tony and pleaded with him to take the offer of protection. There was resignation in Tony's voice. Come on, Emmett, he said. I'm old and fat and worn out, too tired to go count the days in some strange place. That's just another kind of jail. I never wore a mask when I robbed banks. Never liked to hide. Maybe that was stupid, but I won't start hiding now. I did what I did. A month later, Tony disappeared. His body was discovered shortly after near the Pawtucket Gatehouse, tangled among the debris that gathered at the flashboards above the falls. There were 2 bullets in his head and the word rat scrawled in marker across his shattered face. Emmett found that he was crying as he read the account in the Lowell Sun. What a crazy world, he thought. We have priests who supposedly devote their lives to Christ and end up raping children. Respected lawyers whose job it is to make sure killers go free. Politicians who say they want a service and no one can understand how they got so rich. And then we have a convict who dies for a stranger because he doesn't want to think of his children celebrating Christmas without dad. Emmett shook his head and spoke to his friend wherever he was. This whole stinking ship is full of rats. But Tony Dos Santos, you are not one of them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen. That was excellent. Okay, next up, we have Rock and a Hard Place own Katrina Robinson. She is the content coordinator and editor with Spark, providing support to Microsoft. She currently resides in Charleston, South Carolina, and she enjoys collecting vinyl, books, and clothes, a woman of my own heart. You're up.
Hey, folks, thank you for that intro. I'm happy to be here. Tonight, I'm going to be reading a piece of flash fiction. It's titled Midnight Stroll. Footsteps behind me quicken. Legs move faster. I almost whisper the words out loud. I fumble with my purse, groping for something, anything to make him stop. Half jogging now. My mouth is dry, but I can't stop breathing through it. I strain to hear him above my pounding heartbeat. Useless fucking fingers. Can't tell a tube of lipstick from a lighter. He's closer, faster than me. I focus, wrap my hand around whatever it touches, stumble. His grip on my shoulder, heavy and digging. He spins me around. My bag is on the ground now, but my right hand isn't empty. It grips a thick, sturdy pen so hard my knuckles are white. And he pins my arms down. I still have the pen, clutching it. Why are you running from me? Rough, angry, breath like a bar, hot on my face. I open my mouth to speak. Blinded, on all fours now, the sidewalk rough on my knees. The left side of my jaw doesn't feel right. Then he's on me and I'm on my belly. The concrete ate some skin, but I don't feel it. Definitely feel his prick, hard against my back. Flipped over, head hitting the pavement. I grunt. Can't move my arms. His knees are heavy on them. His face is white against the darkness, smiling. His teeth are yellow. He hits me again, higher on my face, closer to the temple. He sits back, less weight on my arms. It's only the right one I want. I stare at his face, memorize lines, wrinkles, acne scars. The glare off his beady eyes. Rage radiates, blood boiling, skin searing. He doesn't seem to notice. He talks. I don't listen, not really. I just stare and move my arm, slowly, centimeter by centimeter. He unbuckles his belt, licks his lips, pulls on the strap, frees it, loop by loop. He holds it in the air, looks at it like he doesn't know what it is, like he's never seen it before. Have to move faster. He wants to hit me again. I wrench my right fist free from his weight, hold the fist above my head, shaking. The whole left side of my face is wet, chilly in the breeze. I'm not scared, not really, not anymore. He looks down, sneaky smile on his fucking rat face. Then it disappears. His mouth opens. Gurgles spurt. He tries to stand, fails. I watch, cock my head, still shaking. He grasps at his neck, suddenly weak and small. The pen is sticky in my fist. I'm up, over him. I tower over him, Jack's giant, glaring. I straddle him, feel the power he had only moments before. Bring the pen up in both hands now. My stare pierces his neck. He claws at me, punches a breast, but the pain doesn't come. My fists bring the pen down, up and down, repeating the motion. I'm at the gym, doing reps. Have to try my hardest, move my fastest, and with the most force. I don't count the number of times. I only stop stabbing when the pen breaks in two, lodges itself in a mess of meat. The gurgling has stopped. My breath is the only sound. My face is wet, dripping red, too tired to sit up. I roll onto my back. Sharp needles begin to edge in. My body is molten metal. Tinny, muffled voices in the distance. My view of the black sky is muddled. Blood in my eyes. I close them. Oh my God, what happened? He's dead. Call for help. Words getting clearer, closer, on top of me. Eyes clenched. I imagine I'm at home, in bed, falling asleep with the TV on. That's it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Katrina. That was awesome. That was very powerful. Also, Jack's giant, like you had me there. You got me, man. Okay, gather myself now. All right, now for Preston Lang, who I had the great pleasure of interviewing the other day, and y'all will see that soon enough. Preston Lang is a native of New York and almost entirely a product of its public school system. His short work has been published in Ellery Queen magazine, Thuglit, and Best American Mystery Stories 2019. He's also published 4 novels with Down and Out Press and writes a regular column for WebMD.com. You're up.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I just realized that I'm probably using my daughter's account. That's why it says Small Potato Queen. She's 9, and that's when, girls start getting into potatoes and that kind of thing. I'm going to read a story, flash fiction called Bold Colon. Old department was there with 11 execs teleconferenced in from around the country. We talked about whether the colon in a heading should be bold or not. When we read an internal report, the heading might be funding or departmental interface. That's in bold, no controversy there. But after, say, funding, there's a colon, right? Some people were putting that colon in bold, some people weren't. And everyone got very worked up about the issue. There were factions: pro-bold colon faction, anti-bold colon faction. You want to know what faction I was in? I was in the extreme, don't talk to me, don't look at me because I don't even give a walrus buck faction. But I was the only one in that faction. Everyone else had really strong views and saw nothing wrong with sitting around talking about it for 3.5 hours. Fine, you say, one meeting and then it's settled. No, the meeting just served as a kind of opening salvo to what would become an all-out war. It spread to all other departments. There were email chains, conflicting style guides, appeals to the writings of Michel Foucault, Steve Biko, David Hume, Martin Luther King, and Enid Blyton. Seating arrangements were completely overhauled. Canvas partitions were set up, and there were post-work meetings, well attended and completely voluntary, where officers were elected and minutes were taken. Leaders emerged. I can't believe Henry, Janice said to me one morning. He knows he's wrong. It's all just ego at this point. I saw Henry later that day. Man, can you believe those people? It's like Salem 1692 with them. He drew comparisons to inquisitors, Maoists, Dickensian villains, and of course Nazis, all because he wanted to put a colon in bold. No, wait. He wanted the colon bold. Sorry about that. Henry and his cohort wanted the bold colon. One day, it all came to a head in the break room. Henry and Janice screaming, throwing things, people backing their champions with chants and hand claps and hysterical insults, butchers of decency, punctuational terrorism, 2 dark dots of hegemonic wrath. Great, then. Have we gotten it out of our system? Can we go back to being human? No. We just fortified the armies, drawn the battle lines a little clearer. No one was going to back down. This was Paris' part. Well, someone had to do something. In a world gone mad, as you may have heard, a hero must rise. That Monday evening, I went to the library, created a new email account, and wrote to Janice. If you do not agree to boldface the colon, I will reveal everything. I have access to your computer. I've seen it all. I sent the same message to Henry, changing bold to unbold. Then I waited. Janice came in early the next day, surly and unkempt, but she sat down and did her work. Henry didn't show. Sick, I guess. The next day he was still missing. The day after that, the boss called us for an all-hands meeting. It is my sad duty to inform you that we have lost a friend and a colleague. Henry Porter took his own life on Monday evening. There will be a memorial service on Friday. There were gasps and inane expressions of disbelief and crying, real genuine sobs from the folks in his faction. In his faction, they were rudderless, bereft, without their sage and seer. Even women in editorial who were against him on the colon started tearing up a bit. The boss worked the room, pressing a few shoulders, murmured a few sensitive words. Finally, Janice spoke up. So, no bold on the colon then. And that's it.
Excellent. So, we are going to have another little intermission. And so we have our Rob Butowski. Forgive me. I'm so bad with names. I apologize. But he is going to wow y'all once again.
Cool. This is a song called The Gurch. It's by a group that I play in called Black Flamingos. I hope you guys dig it.
All right, that was awesome, man. Thank you. Okay, we are on to our next group of writers. Next, we have editor Jay Bukowski. He is a writer of crime fiction and an eater of tacos who lives in central New Jersey. His short fiction has appeared in Shotgun Honey, Out of the Gutter, Near to the Knuckle, Yellow Mama, and Story and Grit magazines. He's a co-host of the Asbury Park Noir at the Bar reading series and has self-published 2 short story anthologies through his neo-pulp imprint, Episodes from the 0 Hour. So please welcome Jay.
Thanks, Katrina. Can everyone see me? I don't know if I'm on camera or not, but you guys might be doing better off without me being on camera. So the story that I'm going to read tonight, I started at 8 in the morning and I finished at 2 in the afternoon. But it's one that I've wanted to, get off my chest for a while. It is about the current situation that's going on. It was inspired by a news story that I read, and it's called What's One More? Ephraim Walker, everyone called him Ray, but his mama had a biblical streak to her, stood silent vigil, watching through the fireproof glass of the old cremator door as the cardboard glowed hot orange before disintegrating into ash, emitting a plume of acrid gray smoke into the ether. He leaned on the 4-foot steel pole that they used to shut the red-hot metal door of the incinerator. Jimmy could swear he saw the solid steel flexing and bowing under Ray's massive muscled frame. Jimmy, for his part, took the opportunity afforded by Ray's solemnity to rest against a stack of equally sized cardboard boxes piled on the mortuary floor. Ray had insisted that each body was owed their due, and no matter how many bodies came in, Ray gave each one a moment of silent respect after they pushed them into the fire. Jimmy didn't really care much about silent respect, but he figured he could use a breather from trying to keep up with the big man. Jimmy Rossi couldn't remember a time when Ray Walker wasn't working for his dad at Rossi's funeral home. It just seemed like he was always there from time immemorial, like he came with the building or something. Some big, dark golem that they had inherited with the janky mortuary tables and the dilapidated hearse and the aging and temperamental cremator when they moved here from upstate. Despite his near constant presence in his home and in his life, Jimmy knew next to nothing about Ray. He was big. He was quiet, but not in a gentle, quiet kind of way, more like a volcano before it blows its top. Ray didn't suffer fools and slackers, which means that Ray and Jimmy didn't get along because Jimmy was both a fool and a slacker. The fact that he was the boss's kid was probably the only thing that spared Jimmy from a good old-fashioned ass kicking. With the other guys working there, Jimmy could joke around between stiffs, maybe take a swig of something from a brown bag-clad bottle, maybe at least listen to the radio. When Jimmy was on shift with Ray, he knew it was going to be a long, hard day of loading bodies into the cremator in near silence. At least he didn't have to do too much of the heavy lifting. Ray was plenty capable of handling the bodies by himself if he had to, so Jimmy just kind of phoned it in on the light end of the body whenever they had to lift the next one up onto the rollers. Even slacking off, though, Jimmy knew he was going to wind up with a sore back by the end of the day. The sheer number of bodies coming into Rossi's funeral home was staggering. People were dropping like flies because of the Rona. Big Jim, the funeral parlor owner, never looked a gift plague in the mouth. Money was coming in hand over fist to dispose of the bodies from 3 nearby medical centers. Big Jim magnanimously used his newly flushed coffers to hand out a couple extra flimsy bandanas and some secondhand work gloves to his staff, his own kid included, as a means of distributing PPE. The bodies would arrive from the hospitals in nondescript matching cardboard, a carbon copy slip taped to the side of the box to identify who was inside. No one came to mourn the dead. No one was allowed. Before COVID-19, a busy day on the cremator at Rossi's was usually 7 or 8 cremations. These days, they routinely did between 25 and 30. Ray started to stir from his watchful post, meaning break time was about over for Jimmy. As the 2 men wordlessly bent down to pick up the next cardboard coffin to lift onto the rollers, a tricked-out Honda with a whiny aftermarket exhaust and a bass-thumping sound system pulled into the loading bay. "Hey, you guys do cremations or some shit here?" asked the oblivious driver through a white bandana, barely audible over the thumping beats coming from his car stereo. "We doing them right now," said Ray as he stood and stretched his massive frame. "Geez, man, someone ate their Wheaties growing up," said the driver as he shut down the car and stepped out. "What are you, like 6'5", 6'6"? Ray grunted in response. Undaunted, the man continued. "So I got this problem, and I'm hoping maybe you guys can help me out." "What kind of a problem?" Jimmy asked. "We ain't interested," Ray interjected. The Honda driver, sensing an opening with Jimmy, turned his smarmy charm on the younger man. "See, I got this issue that I kind of want to handle quietly, and I figured you guys were already doing the cremations, right? What's one more?" "I told you we ain't interested," growled Ray. "Who?" asked Jimmy. The driver looked cautiously at Ray over the top of his sunglasses before turning his attention back to Jimmy. "My cousin's husband. Asshole gets sick and he's watching Fox News and he hears the president say, 'Inject bleach.' And so what does this asshole do? He injects bleach." Anyway, it's kind of an embarrassing situation for my family, and we would just prefer to handle it quietly and just have the whole fucking thing go away, right? The driver paused for effect before he continued on. I can pay. He stuck his hand in his pants pocket and produced a wad of large denomination bills. He started counting them off. 200 each? 300? What's a fair price? Jimmy started reaching for the cash when Ray barked an order. Put your monkey cracker ass hand down. I told you we ain't interested. Money's not an issue here, pleaded the driver. Jimmy looked past the driver and into the back seat of the car. A large human-shaped figure was wrapped in a stained and bloody white sheet. That don't look like no bleach injection, said Jimmy, not sure what exactly a bleach injection was supposed to look like. I don't really got time for this shit, said the driver. Look, take the cash, take the body. I wasn't here, okay? We can either do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way, you make a couple bucks. Maybe this ain't such a good idea, realized Jimmy. Fine. You pick the hard way. The driver shoved the cash back in his pocket and whipped a handgun out of the back of his pants. He took a couple steps forward towards Jimmy and held the gun menacingly to the side. Good idea or not, you're going to fucking do this, and you're not going to say shit to no one, or I'm going to come back here and waste both of you fuckers. Ray's volcano top blew. The gunman didn't realize he was in range of Ray's steel pole. The big man grabbed it and swung down hard on the driver's hand, a wet snap announcing that his trigger finger and several other bones were now useless mush. A brief, painful yelp emitted from behind the white bandana. Ray had swung so hard through the man's hand that his entire body lurched forward, and in a fluid, almost practiced maneuver, Ray swung the pole back up. Ray connected with the driver's face. His head snapped back, and his sunglasses went flying. The driver stood bolt upright for a brief, horrifying moment in a confused daze, the very embodiment of the phrase, the lights are on, but nobody's home. Jimmy gasped as crimson crept in from the edges to eclipse the milky white sclera of his eyes as hemorrhages burst in his brain. Deep red spread quickly across the white cloth covering the man's face. He coughed once, spraying droplets of blood all over Jimmy's face, before collapsing in a heap on the mortuary floor next to his discarded handgun. Jesus Christ, I think you killed him, croaked Jimmy. He sprung forward and frantically searched for a non-existent pulse. Ray let the pole clang to the floor and stepped forward, putting a heavy, almost reassuring hand on the younger man's shocked shoulder. Had to be done. You heard him. What's one more? Or two? Ray bent forward and reached into the man's pocket, pulling out the wad of cash. He slipped the money into his own pants pocket. Lift the heavy end this time, asshole, he said gruffly to Jimmy. They worked the rest of the day loading bodies and cleaning up the mess without a word between them.
Nice, Jade. Thank you. All right. I got a message that we know the prize winners. So they are Peter Rozovsky, Alan Klein, Cindy Rosmus, and Robert Blanco. We will follow up after this event and let you know exactly what you won and how to retrieve your prizes. So next we have Richard Reisenberg. He was born into a Jewish-Italian household in Argentina and brought to Los Angeles to escape the fascist regime of his homeland. He has lived there since, except for a digression to Paris in the turbulent 80s. He attended Pepperdine University on a scholarship won in a writing competition, but left in his last year to work in jobs from gritty to glitzy, starting at a motorcycle shop and progressing through offices, retail, an independent design and manufacturing business, and most recently, a stint managing an adult literacy program at a library branch in one of the poorest neighborhoods of the city. All have become source material for his writing. Richard, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I realize I never sent my CV to Roger and Jay, but I've been published in Switchblade, Mystery Tribune, of course, Rock in a Hard Place, Down and Out, and a couple of other little noir venues, Akashic Books, Murder, Mondays or Murder series, etc. Anyway, this story is from Switchblade number 5. It's called The Comforter. And here we go. He sat on the bed and stared out the window. The view from the second story hadn't changed in years. The row of storefronts, a dusty sidewalk, spindly trees growing out of precisely spaced cutouts in the sidewalk, the street between his room and the storefronts. Cars would park at the curb and then leave. In winter, leaves would fall from the trees and rain would settle the dust. People walking up and down the sidewalk going into stores now and then. There was a store underneath his room too, fortunately a quiet one, where a small appliance repairman worked. Sometimes he would hear the whine of a vacuum cleaner or a blender being tested. The repairman, Sammy, had fixed his toaster last spring. The toasts came out just fine now, brown on both sides and smelling of comfort. He would miss the toasts in the morning. There was so much he would miss. He sat on the bed and stared out the window, wishing it would rain. It wasn't the season for rain. If he couldn't figure out a way out of his trouble, he told himself, Jules Taylor would be dead before it rained again. A solid middle-aged woman in a long brown coat went into the bakery across the street. Old Mrs. Rosenstein. He knew her and he knew the baker. He had known old Mrs. Rosenstein when she was a younger Mrs. Rosenstein. Really, she wasn't all that old yet. He had known the baker's father a little. He was dead now. Everyone ended up dead sooner or later. Of course, he knew that. Knowing that is what separates us from the happier animals, he told himself. The point was to put it off as long as possible. But the range of what was possible was growing narrower for him. He couldn't go to the cops since he was in it too deep himself. He had to figure it out on his own, an old man by himself. Not really old, but old enough. And not really by himself, but come on. How could he drag any of his friends into this mess? Bobby Schwartz had talked him into it. An easy grab, he said. The target, as he put it, was rich and wouldn't feel it. Sure, he'll be pissed, but it'll be peanuts change to him. Schwartz got his words mixed up like that. It was one of the things he liked about Bobby. Probably if he hadn't liked Bobby, he would have said no. Maybe he would have gone to the cops himself. But of course, if he had, he'd be in the same trouble he was in now. He knew Bobby had associations with uncompromising people. He should have just said no. But the plain fact was that he didn't. They had known each other for years, and Bobby had never asked him to come in on a business deal. He thought of Bobby as a friend. The problem was that Bobby had come to think of him as a friend. And in Bobby's world, friends helped you out with business. Still, he could have said no. He was pretty sure that Bobby would have accepted that. But Bobby was dead now, and it was his fault. He wasn't the kind of person Bobby had thought he was. That was all just friendly joshing, plain pretending, like a kid. When the target resisted, Bobby drew out a gun and pistol whipped him. But he didn't do it right, and the target dodged it, spun across the room, and pulled a gun of his own from a desk drawer. Bobby took aim first. The target was an older man of Jules's own generation. Jules didn't want to see him die. He shouted and pushed up Bobby's gun hand. It gave the target enough time to shoot Bobby. Bobby's gun fell onto the floor. The target looked at Jules with a half smile and then aimed at him. Jules ran. He was sure he heard the target laughing as he ran. He left Bobby bleeding on the floor of the target's office as he stumbled away. He wasn't even sure how he got home. He was sure that if he didn't figure something out, he could never leave home again and live. It was on TV and in the paper. The target had talked. Everyone knew what he had done. The newspaper was referring to him as the bandit hero who had saved the target's life. But only Bobby's people knew who he was. Bobby's people would certainly not consider him a hero. Then he considered that maybe Bobby hadn't told any of his associates. Bobby had said, "It'll be just you and me, Jules, you know? We'll split the take 50-50. You're a respectable looking guy, you talk good, you'll get his guard down, you know? A little side job. Jules wasn't so respectable looking, he was just ordinary. But he knew what Bobby meant. Ordinary was just the thing. He didn't have the air about him that Bobby had, and that he supposed his associates had, though he'd never met any that he knew of. Maybe Bobby hadn't in fact mentioned it to anybody else, but he couldn't count on that. Bobby's people were everywhere. They owned the garbage concessions in the city. There were payoffs and such. Jules didn't want to end up deep in a landfill somewhere, rotting under a mountain of wilted vegetables in plastic bags. No one would know what had happened to him if Bobby had talked. And it's not like he could ask around. Asking around would instantly reveal that Jules was in fact the bandit hero. Best to lay low. Bobby was a talker. He could easily have mentioned the side job to someone in his circle. But how could he find out when he didn't dare leave his apartment? He was between jobs, that's why he had fallen for the offer. It was still stupid. He had a new job starting in a month. He had money in the bank too. He could have just sat back and given himself a little vacation, maybe even taken a trip. But he had decided to play the tough guy and help Bobby out. Now he was the bandit hero and everyone was after him. Maybe if he grew a mustache, it would help. But then the people who knew him would notice he had grown it and ask him why. What could he say? That it was the closest he could get to a red sports car? He already had a red sports car, even if it was kind of faded from being parked in the sun. It was still too conspicuous just to hop into and drive away. Best to leave it in its slot behind the building. He had to figure something out. He stared out the window at the bakery. He would run out of food pretty soon. It had already been a week. He looked around the bedroom. He had been quietly happy there for a long time. He could have afforded something grander, but he truly liked the apartment and his neighbors and the homey feel of the street with its small shops and its brace of cozy diners. He had moved there temporarily after a divorce 12 years before and had never left. A new, quieter life. New friends added to the old, at least the old who hadn't sided with his ex. He could have lived there till he died. Well, he might do that anyway, but it could be sooner than he considered ideal. The bric-a-brac on the shelves stared down at him, bits and pieces of his life. Nothing valuable, nothing that would make him a target himself. Just reminders of better times. There were more of them in the modest living room, along with a shelf of books that he liked to reread. There was also a file cabinet that housed his tax papers and such, and a collection of cheap notebooks where he had kept a diary. He hadn't touched the diary since he had agreed to help Bobby out. He couldn't even make himself think of opening it now. How could he write any of this down? Anything he said could and would be used against him in a court of law, or the court of the streets. He brought his mind back to the bedroom and the window. Everything was the same on the street. The cars going by and the people walking past the stores, the sad-looking trees, the sound of the weekly garbage truck coming up the block. The garbage truck meant it was Thursday, 1 week since. He saw old Mrs. Rosenstein come out of the bakery holding a box. She lingered in the doorway, holding the door open, and said something to someone inside. Then she stepped to the curb, looked carefully both ways, and came across the street. She glanced up at his window, saw his face, and gave him a little wave and a smile. He tried to smile back, but it felt like it didn't work. His face was stuck. Mrs. Rosenstein smiled brighter and lifted the bakery box up to show it to him. He didn't get up from the bed. She disappeared from view. Then he heard his doorbell ring. It made him jump. He didn't know what to do. Then he thought of telephoning the repairman below him, whose shop was right by the front door to the upstairs apartments. He pushed the buttons on the phone, misdialed, hung up, and pushed again. The old man answered. "Sammy," he said, "it's Jules from upstairs. I've been sick. Could you peek outside and see who rang my bell?" The voice twanged through the wires that it was only old Mrs. Rosenstein. "At least I guess it's her. I saw her walking up." It struck Jules as funny that they both called her old Mrs. Rosenstein, but it wasn't funny enough to make him laugh out loud. He thanked Sammy and hung up the phone. The doorbell rang again, short, little, reasonable rings. He went to his front door and pressed the button that unlocked the door downstairs. He stayed in the living room and after a few moments heard footsteps in the hallway. "Mr. Taylor," she said, "it's me, Mrs. Rosenstein. I brought you a little something from the bakery." He opened the door carefully. Mrs. Rosenstein stood there, alone in her faded brown coat, her heavy face smiling quietly. "Have you been sick, Mr. Taylor? We haven't seen you on the street. I thought you might like a little something to brighten your spirits, you know?" Jules finally managed to smile. Mrs. Rosenstein had always been kind to him. She knew everyone in the neighborhood. He opened the door wider and waved her in. "Yes," he said, "I've been upset." "There's that flu that's going round," she said. She put the bakery box down on the desk by the window of the living room. She kept her purse on her arm, so maybe she wouldn't stay too long. If she stayed long, he would be tempted to tell her what had happened, but he couldn't tell anyone. Mrs. Rosenstein would be shocked and might go to the cops herself. He kept silent while she leaned clumsily over the desk and opened the bakery box. There were pastries inside. "I know," she said. "I should have brought chicken soup. I hope this will do." Jules found his voice again, which came out dry and cracked. "Thank you, Mrs. Rosenstein. It's wonderful." The word wonderful didn't sound very wonderful the way he said it. Mrs. Rosenstein turned around and smiled at him again. The smile sat well on her heavy features. She half wrapped the Danish in a paper napkin that had been in the bakery box and held it out to him. He took it, feeling stupid. "It's peach," she said. "I remember you told me once how much you like peach Danish." He nodded and took a bite of it. He couldn't taste it at all. Mrs. Rosenstein's smile weakened, then she brightened up again. She looked around the room. She was still in her long coat with her purse on her arm. Maybe she would leave soon. "Mr. Taylor," she said, "you told me you were married once, didn't you?" The garbage truck had stopped in front of his building now, roaring loudly, and he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. "Married?" he said. Mrs. Rosenstein nodded, then raised her voice slightly. "Yes, didn't you tell me you were married once?" He nodded. "She left me." He had to raise his own voice over the roar of the truck outside. "Do you still miss her?" He nodded. Mrs. Rosenstein smiled again. "I was married before too. My first husband died in unfortunate circumstances. But he left me a son, a beautiful son. Do you have any children, Mr. Taylor?" The garbage truck's hydraulics wailed as it lifted a bin and banged it repeatedly just outside his window. There would be one more bin. That was the pattern. "No," he said, "no kids." Mrs. Rosenstein pondered the matter briefly. "Then," she said, "you can't know how I feel, can you?" He stared at her, holding the Danish in his hand. He felt a crumb fall from his lip. The room vibrated with the roaring of the truck. Mrs. Rosenstein made a graceful move with her arm, and suddenly he saw a tidy little .22 caliber pistol leveled at his head. "Bobby Schwartz," she said. "Bobby Schwartz was my only son." She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were calm and cold. The garbage truck roared and wailed outside his window, banging the metal bin again and again. No one would hear a thing, not in the building, not out on the street. He saw her heavy finger move in the trigger guard. There was nothing he could do. Mrs. Rosenstein put the little pistol away in her purse and pulled out a pair of gloves. She drew them onto her hands and then picked up the phone and dialed the repair shop downstairs. "Sammy, it's me," she said. "Please send them up." She hung up the phone and looked around the room. Finally, she saw the empty cartridge glinting by the heater register. She picked it up and held it in her palm, smiling. "Bobby was an idiot," she said to herself, "but he was my idiot." She heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs and opened the door. The two men from the garbage truck stood in the hallway, bulky in their stained green coveralls. Their faces carried no expression at all. One held a thick black trash bag, extra large. Mrs. Rosenstein smiled at them and nodded towards the heap on the floor. The truck still idled with a harsh whooshing sound outside. After they left, she walked around Taylor's apartment for a few minutes. The truck groaned and wailed again and then rumbled down the street. Mrs. Rosenstein looked around. Such a nice apartment, she thought. It's really too bad. She looked at her watch and let herself out the door. In the hallway, she turned around and spoke into the empty rooms. It was wonderful seeing you again, Mr. Taylor. Enjoy the Danish and please take care. Call me if you need anything. And please, get better soon. She smiled into the empty rooms again and shut the door. That's
Very
it.
nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So to take us home is S.J. Rosen. She is the author of 16 novels and more than 70 short stories, and the editor of 2 anthologies. She has won multiple awards, including the Edgar, Seamus, Anthony, Nero, Macavity, Japanese Maltese Falcon, and the Private Eye Writers of America Life Achievement Award. Her latest book is Paper Sun. SJ, take it away.
Thank you. You could hear me? Good, good, good. This story is called Sister of Mercy, and the first time I read it out loud, one of the people who heard it told me I was going to hell. Sister of Mercy. As always, I'm wearing the full habit when the new client arrives. The billowing black cloth and the stiff, pristine white wimple. The client's knock is tentative. I open the door and my first stern words are, "You're late." He's not, but he looks abashed, apprehensive. I point to the floor and I lift the wooden ruler. He kneels, holds out his palm. This will be the first of many blows, the blows he expects. Under my unsympathetic gaze, he disrobes. I do not. I bind him, berate him, beat him. His moans of pain mix with those of pleasure. When he's ready, I reach my hand for him, the hand that bears the silver ring. My cool, soft flesh touches his. His ecstasy is intense. He returns, as each client has, many times. At first, it's the same. Then, gradually, the blows become fewer, my scolding milder. The bonds are the last to change. I loosen them. I begin to caress him. By the end of our time together, he is not bound, and I am unclothed. We embrace, we touch, and we make love, something he has never really done before in all the times he's been with women. I am able, after all the times I've been with men, to judge when he is no longer a slave to the joy of fear, the thrill of dread. The nuns of his childhood gave him that affliction. I've spent my lifetime curing it. One day I tell him we've had our last hours together. He weeps. I console him, send him back into the world to find true and gentle love. When he's gone, I meticulously dress in my habit again. I return to the convent, where my sisters will ask how went my work today, ministering to the poor. The poor in spirit, I will reply, and tell them I believe, with God's grace, that I was able to lighten someone's load. The end. I'm going to hell.
You may be going to hell, but I will see you there. All right, so to finish up the night, Rob is going to take us out with another musical interlude. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to all the readers.
All right, thanks, Rob. And thank you everyone for watching and for joining. I'm going to say the names of the readers again because I want you to check out their work. We had with us tonight, we had our editors, Jay Bukowski, John Elliott, Nikki Dawson. John wasn't able to join. Katrina Robinson, we want you to check out John's stuff anyway, though. Al Tucker. The readers that were featured in either issues 1 or 2 were J.D. Graves, Dustin Engstrom, Rob Bukowski was the musician, sorry, Steve O'Connor, Preston Lang, Richard Reisenberg, and S.J. Roseanne. You can check out our issues at rockindaheartplacemag.com. We're going to work on issue 3 now. It'll be out in the summer. And you can find exclusive content at our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/RHPmag. Again, my name is Roger Noakes, editor-in-chief of Rockin' Heart Place magazine, and thank you for joining.